Shalom, my friends. Right now, as you watch this video, there's a divine financial code hidden in the Torah that most people never discover, and it's the exact reason why some individuals seem to attract wealth effortlessly while others struggle their entire lives despite working twice as hard. The ancient sages knew something profound. God doesn't withhold prosperity because he wants you to suffer, but because he's waiting for you to undergo a specific transformation. This isn't about working harder or learning more investment strategies. It's about understanding that your external wealth is a direct mirror of your internal refinement. The Torah teaches us through the concept of avijut hanefesh, the purification of the soul, that before gold can shine, it must pass through fire, and before you can hold wealth, you must first be refined. Consider this unsettling truth. You might be praying for financial breakthrough while simultaneously carrying the exact character flaws that are blocking your blessings. The Torah reveals in Deuteronomy 8:18 that God gives you the power to create wealth, but notice it doesn't say he gives wealth directly. He gives you the power to create it. This power isn't activated through external circumstances. It's unlocked through internal transformation. Every prophet, patriarch, and person of prosperity in Scripture underwent a refinement process before their elevation. Abraham left his comfort zone, Joseph endured slavery and false accusations, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, and David faced Goliath. Their wealth and influence came after their character was tested and refined. Here's what keeps most people trapped in financial limitation. They're seeking external solutions to internal problems. You can learn every investment strategy, read every financial book, and attend every prosperity seminar. But if your internal vessel is cracked, damaged, or unprepared, the blessings will flow through your hands like water through broken pottery. The Torah's lapidation process, the spiritual cutting and polishing of your inner diamond, is not punishment, it's preparation. God is refining you because he sees your potential for greatness, and he knows that unrefined character holding significant wealth leads to destruction. Today, I'm going to reveal the 6 divine principles of inner refinement that must occur before supernatural prosperity can manifest in your life, and more importantly, how to cooperate with God's refining process instead of resisting it. The Torah begins with a profound metaphor in the very structure of creation itself. Darkness before light, chaos before order, void before fullness. Genesis 1:2 describes the earth as tohu vavohu, formless and void, before God's refinement process began. This isn't just cosmology, it's a blueprint for personal transformation. You are that rough diamond, created with immense value, but requiring cutting, polishing, and refinement before your true brilliance can emerge. The Hebrew word for diamond, yahalom, shares the same root as halom, meaning to strike or beat, because diamonds are formed under intense pressure and refined through precise cutting. Your current financial struggles aren't random chaos. They're the exact pressure needed to transform your carbon state character into diamond-level excellence. The tragic mistake most people make is viewing their difficulties as obstacles to prosperity, when, in reality, they are the prosperity process itself. In the diamond cutting industry, a master jeweler studies a rough stone for months, sometimes years, before making the first cut because one wrong move can shatter the entire diamond. God operates with the same meticulous care in your life. Your delays aren't denials. They're divine timing, ensuring that when wealth arrives, you have the structural integrity to hold it. The Talmud teaches in Pirkei Avot 2:9 that a good heart outweighs all other virtues because it's the foundation upon which everything else is built. Your heart, your character, integrity, generosity, and faith, is the unrefined stone that must be worked on first. Consider the biblical example of Esau, who sold his birthright for a bowl of lentils. He had access to tremendous inheritance, but lacked the refined character to value it, steward it, or multiply it. His unrefined impulsiveness cost him everything. The same pattern repeats throughout history. Lottery winners who lose everything within years, athletes with $100 million contracts who declare bankruptcy, entrepreneurs who build empires only to destroy them through unrefined character flaws. The refinement process begins with brutal self-honesty about your current state. You cannot refine what you refuse to acknowledge. The Torah demands cheshbon hanifesh, an accounting of the soul, which is infinitely more important than an accounting of your finances. Ask yourself these diagnostic questions. Do you consistently blame external circumstances for your financial situation? Do you harbor bitterness, jealousy, or resentment toward those who have prospered? Do you operate with integrity even when no one is watching? Are you generous with the little you have, or are you waiting until you have enough to start giving? Do you honor your word and commitments regardless of convenience? These aren't religious questions. They're wealth capacity questions. God is scanning your character infrastructure to determine if you can handle the blessing without it destroying you. The rough diamond doesn't question why it must be cut. It trusts the master jeweler's vision of what it's becoming. The Torah reveals a non-negotiable principle in Proverbs 17:3. The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests hearts. Notice the progression. Precious metals must pass through fire to remove impurities, and your heart must pass through testing to remove character flaws that would sabotage your prosperity. This isn't optional spiritual theory, it's the mandatory physics of lasting wealth. Every person destined for significant financial impact will face what the Kabbalah calls zimtzum, divine contraction or concealment, where it appears God has withdrawn his presence precisely when you need him most. This apparent abandonment is actually the most intimate form of divine involvement, because it forces you to develop the internal resources, faith muscle, and character strength you'll need to steward greater responsibility. The fire doesn't destroy you, it reveals what you're truly made of by burning away everything that isn't essential. Consider Joseph's journey, perhaps the most comprehensive refinement story in Torah. Sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused of sexual assault by Potiphar's wife, forgotten in prison for years after accurately interpreting dreams. Every circumstance screamed of injustice and abandonment. But the Torah uses a specific phrase in Genesis 39:2. Hashem was with Joseph, even in slavery, even in prison, even in apparent disaster. The fire of testing was developing skills Joseph didn't know he needed: administration in Potiphar's house, resilience in prison, dream interpretation that would later save nations, and most critically, the elimination of any entitlement, pride, or arrogance that would have destroyed him when Pharaoh elevated him to second in command over Egypt. Had Joseph gone directly from his father's favorite son to prime minister without the refinement years, his character couldn't have sustained the position. The testing wasn't delaying his destiny, it was creating his destiny. The same fire that could have made him bitter instead made him better, and his refined character allowed him to save his entire family and establish the foundation for the nation of Israel. The fire of testing specifically targets your weakest areas because those are the points where future wealth would escape or corrupt you. If you struggle with pride, God will engineer humbling circumstances. If you struggle with control, He'll create situations where you must surrender. If you struggle with trust, He'll remove visible means of support to force you onto faith. If you struggle with generosity, He'll test you with scarcity to see if you'll still give. These aren't punishments. They're precision surgical procedures removing the exact tumors that would become terminal in your prosperity season. The Hebrew concept of Yishurim Shel Ahava, afflictions of love, teaches that God's most intense refinements are reserved for those He's preparing for significant assignment. Mediocre character can handle mediocre blessing, but extraordinary calling requires extraordinary refinement. The intensity of your current pressure is proportional to the magnitude of your coming promotion. Stop praying for the pressure to decrease and start praying for your capacity to increase, because the fire isn't going away until the impurities do. One of the most dangerous prosperity blockers embedded in human nature is entitlement, the belief that you deserve blessing based on your effort, suffering, or comparison to others. The Torah systematically dismantles this mindset starting in Deuteronomy 8:17-18, where God warns against thinking, "My power and the strength of my hand made me this wealth." Entitlement is spiritual cancer that prevents refinement because it positions you as creditor and God as debtor, when the reality is infinitely reversed. Before you can receive divine prosperity, you must undergo the death of entitlement and be resurrected into radical gratitude and grace consciousness. This death is painful because entitlement feels like justice, but it's actually pride masquerading as righteousness. The refined person understands a revolutionary truth. You deserve nothing, you've earned nothing, and everything you receive is unmerited favor from a generous God. This isn't self-degradation, it's accurate theology that becomes the foundation for supernatural abundance. The biblical Job represents the ultimate entitlement death experience. A righteous man who lost everything, children, wealth, health, reputation, with no apparent reason or explanation. His friends insisted he must have sinned to deserve such suffering, operating from an entitlement paradigm that assumes good behavior guarantees good circumstances. But God's response in Job 38-42 is essentially, "Who are you to demand explanations from the Creator of the universe? Were you there when I laid the foundations of the earth?" Job's refinement required him to die to the belief that his righteousness entitled him to protection, prosperity, or even answers. His breakthrough came in Job 42:5-6 when he said, "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." Notice he repented not of sin, but of his limited perspective and entitled expectations. Only after this death of entitlement does the Torah record, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before, not as wages earned, but as grace received. Practical entitlement manifests in countless ways that block your financial refinement. Believing you deserve a better job without developing better skills, resenting others' success instead of learning from it, expecting God to prosper you while you remain ungenerous with others, demanding breakthrough without embracing the character work, or comparing your timeline to someone else's journey. The refined individual operates from what Kabbalah calls bittul, self-nullification, which paradoxically becomes the pathway to greatest self-actualization. When you release claims and embrace grace, you step out of performance-based anxiety and into rest-based productivity. You stop measuring your worth by your bank account and start measuring your character by your obedience. You quit demanding God explain His timing and start trusting His goodness even in delays. This death of entitlement doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful because you're no longer controlled by expectations, comparisons, or the need to justify your existence through achievement. You work harder than ever, but from overflow rather than emptiness. You pursue excellence without attaching your identity to outcomes. You give generously knowing everything comes from God and returns to God. This refined consciousness becomes the vessel that can finally hold lasting wealth without it poisoning your soul. Modern culture worships speed, hacks, and shortcuts, but the Torah reveals an immutable law. There is no shortcut to refinement, and attempts to bypass process always result in delayed destiny or complete disqualification. The Hebrew word derek means both way and process, teaching that the journey itself is the destination because who you become en route determines what you can sustain when you arrive. God isn't primarily interested in getting you to prosperity quickly. He's committed to ensuring you become the kind of person who can steward prosperity righteously. This requires submission to divine process, which feels excruciatingly slow to our microwave culture, but operates at the perfect speed for transformation without destruction. The unrefined person constantly looks for easier paths, faster routes, and methods to skip steps. The refined person understands that every step, every season, and every seeming detour is precisely calibrated curriculum in the University of Divine Preparation. The Israelites' 40-year wilderness journey is the definitive biblical study in the necessity of process. The physical distance from Egypt to the Promised Land was approximately 250 miles, a journey that should have taken weeks, not decades. But Numbers 14:33-34 reveals God's mathematics. Your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, according to the number of days you spied out the land, 40 days for every day a year. 1 year of process for every day of faithless observation. The wilderness wasn't geographic, it was formational. God was refining slave mentality out of them and instilling kingdom mentality into them. He was teaching them to trust His provision through manna, obey His instruction through Torah, and depend on His presence through the cloud and fire. Every person who tried to shortcut the process failed. Those who hoarded manna found it rotting. Those who rebelled against Moses were swallowed by earth. Those who tried entering the promised land prematurely were defeated. The entire generation that refused submission to process died in the wilderness, and only their refined children entered the inheritance. Your submission to process requires 3 commitments that most people refuse, which is precisely why they remain in perpetual financial wilderness. First, embrace hidden seasons where you're developing without recognition. Joseph served faithfully in slavery and prison with no audience, no applause, and no apparent progress toward his dreams. Your willingness to steward small, invisible assignments with excellence qualifies you for large, visible platforms. If you perform only when watched, you're unrefined. Second, accept correction and mentorship even when it wounds your ego. Proverbs 12:1 states, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid." The refined person seeks wise counsel, receives hard feedback without defensiveness, and adjusts behavior accordingly. The unrefined person rejects input, blames messengers, and repeats destructive patterns. Third, complete the current level before demanding the next one. You're in your current job, relationship, or financial level for a reason. Extract every lesson, develop every skill, and pass every test before God promotes you. Trying to jump levels results in exposure of your unpreparedness and humiliating regression back to lessons you refuse to learn. The process isn't punishing you, it's protecting your future and preparing you for the weight of what's coming. Perhaps the most counterintuitive principle in Torah economics is that generosity isn't the result of prosperity, it's the requirement for prosperity. Malachi 3:10 presents what God calls a test. "Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, and thereby put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need." Notice God doesn't say, "Get wealthy first, then give," but rather, "Give first, then I'll make you wealthy." This seems financially illogical until you understand that generosity is the ultimate refinement test of your heart posture, faith level, and freedom from fear. The unrefined person hoards resources driven by scarcity consciousness, believing they don't have enough to share. The refined person releases resources driven by abundance consciousness, trusting God's promise that whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. 2 Corinthians 9:6. Your generosity in scarcity becomes your qualification for abundance. The widow of Zarephath in 1 Kings 17 embodies this principle at the most extreme level. During severe famine, she had just enough flour and oil for one final meal for herself and her son before they would starve to death. The prophet Elijah's request was outrageous. "Make me a small cake first and bring it to me, and afterward make something for yourself and your son." He was asking her to give away her last resource to someone else before feeding herself or her child. This is where most people's refinement fails, when generosity demands genuine sacrifice rather than comfortable convenience. But notice her refinement was sufficient. She obeyed, and the result? The jar of flour was not spent, neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord. 1 Kings 17:16. Her supernatural provision was unlocked not by her need, which was desperate, but by her willingness to be generous even in desperation. She had to release before she could receive because God was testing whether her heart was refined enough to trust Him beyond logic. Your generosity refinement must occur at 3 progressive levels, each testing deeper faith and freedom. First, convenient generosity, giving from surplus without sacrifice. This is entry level and most people camp here, giving only what doesn't cost them comfort. Second, uncomfortable generosity, giving that requires adjustment to your lifestyle, budget, or plans. This tests whether your resources control you or you control your resources. Third, radical generosity, Giving that appears to threaten your security or future, requiring absolute trust in God's provision. This is where supernatural multiplication occurs, because you're operating at the level of faith that impresses heaven. The pattern throughout Torah is consistent. The generous are entrusted with more because they've proven they won't hoard it. They understand stewardship over ownership, and they've been refined from the fear that drives scarcity. Proverbs 11:24-25 confirms, "One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give, and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered." Your generosity doesn't decrease your wealth, it decreases your wealth. Show me your giving patterns, and I'll show you your ceiling. If you want to break into the next financial dimension, increase your generosity in your current dimension, and watch God trust you with multiplication. The final and perhaps most critical refinement is integrity, the alignment between your public presentation and private character, between what you claim and what you do, between your words and your actions. Proverbs 11:3 declares, "The integrity of the upright guides them, but the crookedness of the treacherous destroys them." In Hebrew, integrity is tam, which means wholeness, completeness, and moral innocence. It's the quality that allows you to sleep peacefully regardless of your bank balance, because you know every dollar was earned righteously, every transaction was conducted honestly, and every commitment was honored faithfully. Unrefined people are willing to compromise integrity for financial advantage, cutting corners, breaking promises, deceiving customers, exploiting employees, or manipulating systems. They may gain wealth temporarily, but they've built on sand, and Jesus warns in Matthew 7:26-27 that when storms come, and they always do, everything built without integrity foundation will collapse. Your integrity refinement determines whether your wealth lasts one generation or seven. King David, called a man after God's own heart, demonstrated integrity refinement in a moment that defined his dynasty. In 2 Samuel 24, he was offered a threshing floor as a gift for his altar, but he responded with a statement that should be engraved in every business person's conscience. "I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God that cost me nothing." 2 Samuel 24:24. David understood that integrity means refusing advantages you didn't earn, paying full price when discounts are unethical, and honoring others' value even when you could exploit situations. This wasn't wasteful, it was worshipful. His integrity in that moment became the location of Solomon's temple, the epicenter of national blessing for Israel. Your integrity in seemingly small financial decisions today is creating the foundation for tomorrow's multi-generational wealth. Every time you do the right thing when the wrong thing would be profitable or convenient, you're pouring concrete into your prosperity foundation. Every time you tell the difficult truth when a comfortable lie would protect you, you're building structural integrity that can support skyscraper-level blessing. The marketplace is the ultimate integrity testing ground because it operates at the intersection of need, greed, and temptation. Your refinement is measured by how you conduct business when no one is watching, what you do with found advantages, how you treat people who can't benefit you, and whether your yes means yes and your no means no regardless of consequences. The Torah specifically commands in Leviticus 19:36, "You shall have just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and a just hin." God cares about your business practices, your accurate representations, your fair dealings, and your honest measurements. Why? Because integrity is the character trait that determines whether you become a conduit of blessing or a dead end of selfishness. When God can trust you with wealth because you've proven you'll handle it with integrity, He releases multiplication. When He can't trust you because you've demonstrated willingness to compromise for gain, He withholds not as punishment, but as protection, protecting you from the judgment that would come from mishandled blessing and protecting others from the harm you would cause with unrefined wealth. Your integrity refinement isn't complete until you can honestly say, "I would rather be poor with integrity than wealthy with compromise," and mean it so deeply that you're willing to prove it through costly decisions. When you reach that level of refinement, poverty becomes impossible because God Himself guarantees the prosperity of the righteous. The divine code of inner refinement isn't religious busywork designed to delay your blessing. It's God's loving commitment to ensure that when prosperity comes, it doesn't destroy you. Every biblical figure who sustained lasting wealth, influence, and legacy underwent extensive refinement before receiving their inheritance. Abraham waited 25 years for Isaac. Moses spent 40 years in wilderness preparation. David was anointed king, but waited years while running from Saul. And even Jesus didn't begin public ministry until age 30, after years of hidden preparation. The pattern is unmistakable and non-negotiable. Refinement precedes reward. Character development precedes resource distribution. And internal transformation precedes external manifestation. Your current financial struggles aren't evidence of God's absence, but proof of His intimate involvement in preparing you for a prosperity you cannot yet imagine. The rough diamond doesn't understand why it must endure cutting, but the master jeweler sees the brilliant gem hidden inside the stone. Here's the revolutionary shift required. Stop resisting your refinement and start cooperating with it. When pressure comes, ask, "What is this developing in me?" instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" When delays occur, inquire, "What am I supposed to learn in this season?" instead of, "When will this finally end?" When tests arrive, respond, "How is this revealing areas I need to strengthen?" instead of, "How can I escape this situation?" Your refinement isn't random difficulty, it's precision preparation. God is removing pride that would make you unbearable with wealth, eliminating entitlement that would make you ungrateful with blessing, burning out fear that would cause hoarding instead of generosity, testing your integrity when no one is watching, and developing character infrastructure capable of sustaining supernatural abundance. The tragic mistake is viewing refinement as delay when it's actually acceleration, because every shortcut attempt adds years to your wilderness, while submission to process speeds you toward promise. The choice before you is clear but costly. You can continue resisting refinement, blaming circumstances, seeking shortcuts, and remaining in perpetual financial wilderness. Or you can embrace the lapidation process, submit to divine cutting and polishing, and emerge as the refined vessel God always intended you to be. Remember, God doesn't give wealth to the most talented, most educated, or most deserving. He entrusts wealth to the most refined because they alone can steward it righteously, multiply it faithfully, and deploy it generously. Your prosperity is coming not despite your refinement, but because of your refinement. The fire you're currently in isn't destroying your dreams. It's purifying your character so your dreams don't destroy you. The pressure you're currently under isn't crushing your future. It's forming the diamond that will finance your future. Stop praying for easier circumstances and start becoming a more refined person, because when your internal transformation is complete, your external transformation will be inevitable, unstoppable, and divinely guaranteed. The code of inner refinement isn't blocking your blessing. It's building your capacity to receive, steward, and multiply blessing that will last for generations. Shalom, and may your refinement be swift, your character be solid, and your prosperity be righteous.